And so whatever you put as an image or an idea in the place of God necessarily falsifies God. Now, a lot of people say, I don't think I could face in life. I don't think I could face life unless I could believe in a just and loving God. It strikes me that that kind of belief in God is actually a lack of faith. You see, the word belief in Anglo-Saxon comes from this Anglo-Saxon root lief. I would as lief. And lief means to wish. So belief really means a strong wish. When you get up and say the creed, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth and of all things visible and invisible, you are really saying, I fervently wish that there exists a God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, etc. Because if you really have faith, you don't need belief. Because faith is an entirely different attitude from belief. Faith is a state of openness or trust. To have faith is, for example, like when you swim, you trust yourself to the water. You don't grab hold of the water when you swim. And if you go stiff and tight in the water and try to catch hold of it, you'll sink. You have to relax. So in the same way, when a cat falls off a tree, the cat doesn't go stiff all over in a state of tension, that is to say, a state of holding on. The cat relaxes. It falls heavily, thumps the ground with its tail, and isn't hurt because it relaxed. So the attitude of faith is the very opposite of clinging, of holding on. So that you could say that a person who is a fanatic in religion, who simply has to believe in certain propositions about the nature of God and the nature of the universe, is a person who has no faith at all, because he's holding on tight. And so when we sing hymns like Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee, these aren't hymns of faith. Or even Luther made such a thing about faith. But he wrote a hymn in German, Ein fester Burg ist unser Gott, a mighty fortress is our God. That's not a hymn of faith. A person of faith doesn't need a fortress. He's not on the defensive, and so in the same way, when churches are designed like the royal courts of kings, you know, in the royal court, the king sits with his back to the wall, which is the position, or used to be the position, of the altar. And around him he would have his courtiers and guards. And their place, of course, in the church design called a basilica, which means the court of a basileus, a king. The bishop sits at the back in his throne, and all his attendant clergy stand around him like his guards in a royal court. Well, why is this? A king stands with his back to the wall because he rules by force. And when his subjects and his courtiers approach him, they prostrate themselves, they kneel down. Why? Because that's a difficult position from which to start a fight. And so, are we projecting the image of a frightened king upon the ground of being the Godhead? We are, you see. Or in a Protestant church, the furniture all looks like a courthouse. The minister wears a black gown, and it's the same black gown as is worn by a judge. And there are pews and pulpits and all the familiar wooden boxes of court furniture. And the minister, like the judge, throws the book at you. He preaches the law laid down in that other idol of God, the Bible. But does God need all that? I mean, is God somebody who takes this aggressive attitude, either of the king in the court where all the subjects must prostrate, or of the judge who bangs the gavel and says, "Baw, baw, 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 baw"? Well, this is ridiculous. And a God so conceived is an idol, and manifests the absence of faith of all those who worship him, because they have no attitude of trust. They cling on to these rules, to these conceptions, and have no fundamental give to life. Now, in a certain way, you might say that a good scientist has more faith than a religious person, because a good scientist says, I want to find out what is the case. My mind is open to the truth, whatever that truth may turn out to be. I have no preconceptions. I may have some hypotheses. I may have some notions in my mind as to what the truth might be, but I'm going to test it. And the test is, I will open all my senses to reality and find out what that reality is. But then again, the scientist runs into a problem, because he knows that whatever comes to him as reality depends on the structure of his instruments and the structure of his senses, and behind the structure of his senses, the structure of his brain. And that's himself. So he has to have, back of all that, an act of faith in his own brain, an act of faith in himself that his physical organism, or his mind, or whatever you want to call it, is indeed reliable and will show him reality, truth, what is. So unless there is a basic and primordial act of faith in yourself, and you can't ultimately check on yourself, you have to believe your senses. You have to believe your reason, your logic, your intelligence. So you have to have faith in that, even though you can't check it. I mean, it's not like your mind's a radio and you can go in and screw in a connection here and fix up another connection there, and so be quite sure. You always have to trust. And behind all that, you see, behind the brain, just as I've shown you before, behind your eyes, there's the blank space, the unknown, the unseen. And therefore one could say that the highest image of God, which is the unseen behind the eyes, the intangible and invisible, which is space, out of which come all the stars, we can say, yes, that is God, but we have no image of that. We do not know what that is. But we have to trust it. There's no alternative. There's no way out. You can't help trusting it. You've got to. But you see, that trust in a God whom one cannot conceive in any way is a far higher form of faith than fervent clinging to a God of whom you have a definite conception. And that conception can easily be wrong, and even if it's right, clinging to it would be the wrong attitude, because when you love someone very much, you shouldn't cling to them.